And baby, I'm TFC till I die.
Hello and welcome back to Toronto Till I Die, the Toronto FC fan show. I'm Michael Newell, and Happy New Year, TTID family. It's good to have you back. We're fresh for the 2025 season. Hope you had a great holiday season. Hope you were safe. Hope your families were safe and healthy as well. A new year normally brings in new hope, but it kind of feels like we're just spinning our wheels and doing the same thing here in TFC land, huh? Well, that may change soon if some of the stories are true. We'll go through some of that tonight and get your comments leading into the start of preseason. Welcoming in for the first time in 2025, my co-host, Jeffrey P. Nesker. Jeff, how are your holidays? How you doing, man?
I'm doing okay. Happy New Year, Mikey Newell. We are missing the third musketeer. Someone is even busier than the two of us are, which is pretty damn busy.
It's transfer rumor season for him, man.
Yeah. Mikey's saying he might let himself into the show tonight, but I believe that he's got a busy enough tomorrow that he's probably going to take the opportunity to not show up tonight. And to be honest, who can blame him? We've all said, there's only so much we can say over and over again. But yeah, Happy New Year. Turts, as always. Happy TTID Day, New Year, same directionless TFC. I don't know if there's any better way to say it. But we're here. We're here for the group therapy because we don't know how to do anything else. We're sickos. We're here to disseminate the rumors and, talk TFC. So let's get to it.
Well, I mean, there's a lot that this club needs to do in a very short period of time. Preseason, as we're sort of hearing through the grapevine, will be starting either at the end of this week or at the maximum next week. It will be next week.
Shout out to Marbella, Spain for
basically confirming preseason for us. But yeah, so TFC will be starting preseason very soon, and of course, as most of you know, we currently do not have a head coach for this team. Now, I say that as, yes, technically we do not have a head coach. I think they do have a head coach. I think someone is in place or pretty much in place. I think they just haven't announced it officially yet, which seems to be the new MO for TFC. Is like, we've got everything. We're just not going to tell you yet until we're ready.
Which doesn't make any sense, right? Like, you can tie up your wagons. You can hitch your wagons up into a circle and make a Custer's last stand. But they're public facing corporation. They have to realize that, like, read the room. The room, we're all bayed. Like, we're all baying for any kind of news. So if the ink is dry on this contract, what are they waiting for? Do you know what I mean?
That's a great question. I think
It suggests Terry Dunfield. I mean, that's Turts coming in off the top.
Terry's never doing that to himself again. Never doing that to himself again.
Never say never, my friend.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
No, but I mean, seriously, and you said it's a great question. If the ink is dry, what are they waiting for? Is it because it's such an underwhelming name? Is it because the ink isn't dry? Is it, the question has to be asked, right?
Yeah, and look, just so, again, for the sickos in the room, you know this, but just in case there are some new people listening to the show, first of all, welcome, subscribe.
What are you doing here?
Keep listening in. Yeah, no, what are you doing here, you sicko? No, thank you for coming on board. We love talking TFC, both the highs and the lows. You've come at a low point, trust us.
Yeah.
Quick recap, of course, we had a manager last season in John Herdman. He quit. basically because he was made to quit, because Canada
Mhm.
Soccer is probably going to ban him from ever coaching in this country again, or at least for a long period of time.
It's amazing how quickly the impetus to get that study over with quickly
Yeah.
disappeared once John Herdman took control of his own narrative, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly. So John is out, and we're currently managerless. There is a list of possible contenders. A lot of you know who a lot of these names are. We'll go through some of them. To be clear, we do not have a definitive, like, yes, this is going to be the manager. There are some hints going around. It sounds
mhm.
like that if everything is as sort of I's dotted, T's crossed. Maybe there's a few T's left to be crossed, that the manager should be announced this week. Um, we'll go through the
You
list of
better.
possible contenders,
Mm.
maybe a couple of outsiders, and then sort of give our impressions of each and where we think they may land, or if they are the right fit for TFC. So I'll start off with the first one, Jeff, and sort of give me your
Hmm.
thought. And of course, Turts has kind of said it there in the comments. It starts kind of with Jim Curtin, the former Philadelphia Union manager who was sacked, maybe
Hmm.
unceremoniously, at the end
I'm
of
glad
last
you said it.
season. For many people that probably weren't inside the Philadelphia Union sort of bubble, a shock considering the success that team has had, considering the success of some of the young players that he has brought through from the academy to the first team and making them a perennial Eastern Conference contender, just getting to an MLS Cup final in
Hmm.
2022, and winning a Shield. So, you know, a lot of people think he should be the front runner. I'm not as sure, but your thoughts, Jeff, on Jim Curtin, and if you think he's a fit for TFC.
I think he's the guy because he hasn't been scooped up yet. So unless he's pulling Jurgen and moonlighting as the Travagio
Travago guy.
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless he's unless he's got that lined up, I think he's the guy. Um, Turts has been waiting with bated breath to get these zingers in, but not big on Curtin. Smells a lot like Bob Bradley. That is
Don't necessarily
such a
disagree with
fair
that.
statement. I don't disagree with that either. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we thought Bob Bradley was the natural conclusion to what ailed TFC. Nobody expected him to forget everything about coaching and everything about his specific style of coaching once he got here. Um, yeah, I mean, Graham, listen, I starred your comment here. I would like some new names, not just leftovers. We all would. That's the state of our club, is we're not in that position, unfortunately. And then I'm gonna have to put you on blast a little bit, which is we already went on failed past MLS coaches. Hindsight is always 2020. Don't make me repeat what I just said, but I don't. I think to a man, we all expected it to be different with Bob Bradley. We've got a bit of sticker shock now, absolutely, but I would still take a so-called failed MLS coach at this stage of where our club is at over some big name that's going to come in and get railroaded by the peculiarities of MLS and the BS that is part and parcel with our club right now. So to circle back, I think he's the guy. Um, and I don't necessarily think it's a terrible idea. Let me let me expand on this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
go.
think he reached his ceiling at Philadelphia, and I think he reached his ceiling in two ways. One, the club was unwilling to spend what he wanted to spend, but I don't know if Jim Curtin is a kind of coach or technical director or whatever that knows how to spend money. His stock in trade is developing academy talent, making everything a nice little pipeline, and not spending a lot of money, which is kind of sacrosanct to how TFC does business. They
That's very
build the
true.
cart before they buy the horse, right? So maybe opposite day is what we need. Um, so yeah, maybe it is a little bit of diminished expectations, as um, Graham said, failed past MLS coaches. I think you know, this idea last year's rebuild where, we were going to get the cult of John Herdman to come in and kumbaya ourselves to a playoff spot proved to be a folly. So maybe the reality is, let's see if Jim Curtin can handle having a budget. And at the very least, he's going to be a steadying hand in, at least stop the bleeding, right?
Yeah, that was funny enough. Just thinking back on Tunnel Club and what we used to do, and at that time, that's kind of all the stuff we said about Bob Bradley. So I don't think Turtz's comment in regards to
It's fair.
the Bob
That's fair.
Bradley stuff is unwarranted. I would say there is a bit of a difference in a sense that I think Jim Curtin is still very current, and that's not to well, it is a diss on Bob Bradley. There's no way you can get around that. Bob Bradley's right now. I don't know if he's current in terms of the ways that he can handle current modern day players. And I think also the fact that he had to do the signing and the coaching was a distraction for him. He had never really done that before.
Sure.
Whereas Jim Curtin will be coming in to coach the team, right? He's not signing players. He's going to have input, but he's not going to be the guy going out and recruiting people if he ends up being the manager. The only kind of the real sort of thing that may stick with me with Jim Curtin is just, Toronto FC, in the end of season press conference and the very few times they've talked afterwards, in the media, they've talked about, we need to build an identity. We need to understand who we are as a club, and the manager needs to come in and fit that mold. Funny enough, a lot of the same things Manchester United are saying, and they're failing. Well, we'll see how Emerson does. But,
I wasn't going to mention. Curtin I want to mention your other club in crisis because
exactly.
Yeah.
But Jim Curtin, he has a particular style. I think he can be flexible and mold it a little bit to what the club may want. But he kind of has a style. He has a possession-based game. Yeah.
To TFCs. Yeah.
And you talked a little bit. And you talked a little bit about the fact that, he has experience bringing academy kids through. Look, that's an emphasis. It's a point of pride with the Philadelphia Union.
Sure.
TFC do bring through young players. Is just finding time for them to actually play and develop and become really embedded first team members and starting 11 members is something that TFC has struggled with in terms of getting a number of those players into those positions. And I wonder, look, we'll talk about Lorenzo Insigne a little bit later in the show. I think that is a shoe that kind of has to drop at some point to make this really work. But if that's the direction TFC's going, then you are finding somebody who has that experience to do that. It may be rough for TFC next season if that's the case. I don't think you're going to go see a copious spending spree from TFC this offseason. Considering a lot of teams are already done their business or have done a lot of their business prior to the opening of the European window or just as the window opened. But if Jim Curtin is the guy, like this is somebody that has that experience within the league and is still current in terms of how the league operates.
It's a steadying hand. I hate this Bob Bradley revisionist history. I'll be the first to raise my hand and say, yeah, it didn't work at TFC and it was an unmitigated disaster. But I think ignoring the fact that you saddled him with two really expensive anchors undid him. It's not like he's the only one. We've seen it with everybody that's had even a passing interest in this club. So going back to Matt Rosati's comment, if Curtin is the guy, why does it take so long to get over the line? I can't imagine there were any suitors. I mean, we can answer.
I think they interviewed quite a few people. Yeah,
and it's not exactly a plum job. For a million different reasons.
Disagree with you. I think I might disagree with you on that.
Look at. Would you take it if you're an up and coming coach?
I think so.
It's a poison chalice. I mean,
yes,
coaches are hired to get fired. So I agree with you. As long as you have a positive outlook, you realize that this is what being a coach in soccer is, in football, in footsoc. As long as you have a but I don't think. I think that that's an ideal, not a reality. Everybody loves to pretend that they're that well adjusted, but the reality is very different. And I think, Jim Curtin coming off of a situation where he thought he had, where he thought he had it in the bag with the union, and then, like you said, unceremoniously dumped. I'm not sure if what my next move is coming to rehabilitate a club that says they need to redo their identity, but is willing to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, Jim Curtin's a very ambitious guy, but his ambition is entirely different than the sort of misguided ambition, it must be said, that TFC has exhibited since we started as a club, right? Like they're almost diametrically opposed. So, I'm not sure that there's enough in it for Jim Curtin to stake his reputation and his future employment on this, even if they're overpaying him. I know that runs counter to the fact that I think he's the guy, but it just supports my feeling that there's so much trouble in the henhouse at TFC. It's unbelievable, and this idea that you can throw money at the problem is why we have Lorenzo Insigne on our roster. So I don't like them doing it over and over again, right?
Yeah, but I think that's the reason why, in some ways, this job is still attractive. Look, it is a market that
if you can fix it, you're a hero. You'll never pay
not
for
even
a
just
drink in this town again.
True, but I think also like just in terms of the club infrastructure, like as much as we do sometimes bang on the club infrastructure and stuff like that, like compared to where he's coming from at the Philadelphia Union, the Toronto FC is like light years, right? In terms of analytics, in terms of scouting,
don't say medical staff or I'm leaving, but
maybe not, but like like in terms of just overall infrastructure and money, like one of the things that Jim Curtin talked about when he was leaving the Philadelphia Union is the fact that, look, if he wanted to compete at the higher level, they needed to spend money, and that club was not willing to do it at the level that he thought was needed, right? And I think that's part of the reason why he was let go. And you come to a club that will spend money, but I think is starting to turn the corner in terms of spending it a little wiser. I don't know if that means MLS Cup. I don't mean if that, but you know what I mean? I think it's a club that is kind of looked around and said, okay, maybe trying to be the outlier in the league is not exactly the way to go. Let's try to, spend money a little smarter and use the tools that this league provides, as dumb as some of them are, to build a proper roster. And I think that's where, Jim could look at this project and say, like, hey, this is something I want to do, especially if they're willing to give him the time.
I guess it boils down to how binary it actually was, right? Like if it really was as simple as, the union were like, you've reached your ceiling, we need somebody else. And he was like, how can you say that if you're not giving me the money to explore that ceiling? So if that was the straw that broke the camel's back, for lack of a better metaphor, then I can see it being a simple arithmetic. Come to TFC because they've got the money for you to eliminate that variable. But there's a million reasons why I can say don't come to TFC, and most of them start with Lorenzo and end with Insigne. But I don't know.
Well, I mean, we can move on Jim, right? Because in the end of the day, that probably is
the guy.
Do I think he's the guy? I oddly don't think he is. I think it's somebody we're not that maybe we're not suspecting. I could be just overthinking.
Lorenzo Insigne, player manager.
No,
I'm telling you, celebrity fan Alan Gorman.
They're just gonna buy him out and then bring him in as manager.
I did a spit take, but at the end of the day, that would be so perfect. And honestly, like I'm here for that. If they decided to dark art it that bad. But anyway, next on the list.
Yeah, so next on the list is Forge FC head coach Bobby Smirniotis. He is on the list. However, I'm taking him off. Like, I'm personally, he's not the guy. And the reason he's not the guy isn't because he's not qualified, because he's not talented. He was just on the pitch this afternoon with Forge FC as they opened up the training camp. So, I mean, if they're going to announce a manager this week, it would be, for him to just be like squatting down watching, Alexander Ashinyotiyansi go through, agility drills and then turn around on a Tuesday and be like, peace, I'm out. Does not feel very much like Bobby Smirniotis.
No, it really doesn't.
It could be, who knows? But look, he's on the list. For record, he was interviewed before John Herdman was hired. I think he was a finalist for the
he
job.
did the rounds with the Impact as well. He was
exactly. So he has been a finalist for an MLS job in this country before with this club specifically. And I'm pretty sure he was contacted for this role again.
Do you wonder if the experience the last go round when he didn't get the job was enough to sour him, and he said, you know what, working with these Canadian clubs is not worth the trouble. I've got a real good thing going with Forge. Why bother?
I don't think it's necessarily that it soured him on MLS clubs. I think, look, if the right situation came up in MLS, whether it be with one of the 3 MLS clubs or a club in the States, I think he has been at least sounded for a couple of US jobs.
I think
he'd
that's
take
what he
it,
wants.
but I
don't
think
he
right
wants to deal
now
with the Canadian MLS sides.
Yeah, but I mean, like, to your second part of your point, which is I have a good thing here at Forge, why would I leave? I think that's more the thing, right? Like, you control that club. You are the point A, point B, point C to point Z, right? Like you are that club in a lot of ways.
Legacy. Exactly.
Right, exactly. And you look, you've made the final every year. You lost last year in the cup final to Cavalry. They're going in the Champions Cup. They just opened up preseason because they're going. They're gonna play Monterrey in like a month.
Exactly.
So like leaving for, as you mentioned before in Curtin segment, a club that's sort of trying to figure out what the hell it is and try, like Bobby would be very good for that. I actually think. I think he would be if the situation was right and everything was kind of in a great space where he was comfortable with leaving Forge and coming to TFC. He would be the guy that fits a philosophy. He would be the guy who's able to drive that to players and get them to really buy in. And when I talk about buy in, it's not just like, hey, I like what you're saying. It's more like, no, this is the way that we need to play, and this is how we are going to drive excellence every day. He would be that guy. But I just think right now, why would he leave Forge? Like, there's no, why would you leave? Arguably right now, I know people are going to hate hearing this, but arguably the best club side in the country at the moment, right? Like I know Vancouver's won the Canadian Championship, but like
by the skin of their teeth, that game was not that was not a soccer game. It was a war of attrition,
right? So like I think, so I think in the end of the day, there's no impetus for him to leave, and therefore I think he stays at Forge. I don't think he's the guy.
And Alex, we've never hit it this sideways, but Alex raises a really interesting point. Considering how good and consistent Forge and Cavalry have been, I'm shocked they haven't been poached. That speaks to a failure of the CPL to move up the rungs, either out of a stubbornness on their part. I mean, whatever. I don't even want to suppose, but it's a very interesting question that Alex coaches. If we were looking at this from the outside, if we had no skin in the game, no vested interest, we were in Sweden and we were looking at MLS clubs in the CPL, we'd have the same perspective. Like, what's going on? These guys are kicking ass in a lower tier and they haven't been poached yet. So what's the issue? Is it gun shy on the MLS side? Is that they believe their own press and that the levels are that much different? Or is there like a lack of polite discourse between the two entities? I don't know, but it is a very interesting question.
It might be part of that. I think there is some of that, like you're coming from CPL and it's not considered a level yet. I disagree with that. I also just think that you're talking about two coaches that are in very comfortable positions at clubs that are well run.
It could be as simple as that. Yeah, it could
be
as simple as that.
Why leave? Yeah. If both you're talking about two managers again, who are the be all and end all of that club, right, of their clubs. So,
do you want to play Monterrey or do you want to lose 5-0 to Real Salt Lake? Like, I mean, so
no, I think they would take if the right again, like I said, if the right opportunity presents itself, they would go. I just don't think this is the right opportunity for Bobby Smirniotis. No, I think you wait for something that is right. Personally, I think Vancouver would actually be the best fit for him. But for
Bobby?
Yeah, I think so.
I think it's so far outside the GTA that he's got no.
He's got national reach. It's not just GTA. He has national reach. Yeah, I think that wouldn't be a problem. I really don't think that would be a problem. But I mean, to me, if everything was perfect, Bobby Smirniotis would be the guy. But he's not. I think he's sticking with 4G's at training camp right now. So they're playing up a redeemer.
That's
so
fair.
I don't think he's leaving.
Oh,
but
God,
hey, we could be
Nickelback.
surprised.
Here comes Mr. Nickelback. This is a terrible idea. I don't like
On
him.
the list as well, I think it's been confirmed in reports that the club has spoken to him. Vanni Sartini, the former manager of the Vancouver, then now former, again, surprising, maybe less surprising than Jim Curtin, but somewhat surprisingly got sacked by the Whitecaps at the end of the season.
Really surprising.
As well. Again, don't think he's the guy. I don't think he's the person. I don't think he'd be the person for TFC.
I think he's a likable person.
Yeah.
I mean, but I've seen nothing in his coaching style. I've seen nothing in his tactical nous. I've seen nothing that makes me excited about this dude. I mean, we faced off against his squad in the V Cup final, and like I said, it was a war of attrition. Like I'm not happy with those kind of tactics from TFC or Vancouver. So I'm not like jumping in queue for Sartini ball. I don't even know what Vanny ball is. Could you tell me really what Vanny ball is, if not for just resting on the hot hands that is Brian White and Ryan Gauld for 2 seasons?
Well, that's. I mean, look, I think it's structurally, I think from a tactical perspective, I think there was nothing wrong with Vanni Sartini. I just think he would not fit TFC. Like that is not a man who fits the MLSC, TFC, corporate kind of football culture. Like he just wouldn't. Yeah, it wouldn't make sense. And I like, just in my opinion, and I think just from a tactics perspective, like again, if we're sitting here saying, hey, we're worried about, is Jim Curtin going to get, the respect from like a Lorenzo, he might be leaving, but like a Lorenzo Insigne, Federico Bernardeschi, what are we going to be saying about Vanni Sartini, right? Like he might, like he's Italian, they might get along, it might be great and everything. I don't see the fit. I know fans right now are kind of saying like, oh my God, it would be the worst thing ever. I think fans would end up loving Vanni Sartini, because I think if he was manager, I think he would just say what's on his mind a lot of the time. And I think that's something that as fans we like. I don't think that's necessarily the best thing for a football club all the time, but like
it would be refreshing for us.
It would be refreshing. Yeah, it would be refreshing for fans, and I think they would really enjoy it. And I think like he's the kind of personality that in the end, like football fans, whether, if you have him as your coach, you love it. If you don't, and he's your opponent, you hate it. And I think that's just what Vanni Sartini kind of is.
I got such an off-topic question for you. We love Richie Larea. We realize that Richie, most people don't like him because he's not on their team. As a Man United fan, how do you feel about Bruno Fernandes? Does he give you the ick, or do you just love that he plays for you guys and is that disruptive? I'm
relatively indifferent about Bruno Fernandes. Like he came into the club. He was, I don't think he's the captain, but I don't really. I'm indifferent on Bruno Fernandes. I'm more attached to somebody like,
because I was having a debate with a Liverpool fan of mine. And he was going off about how much he disliked Bruno Fernandes. And I said, it's difficult for me. He's like, I don't think I'd even like him if he played on my team. And I go, well, as a TFC fan, we've kind of got a Bruno Fernandes. He's not, but I don't even like putting Richie and Bruno in the same category. Like Richie.
No, and also Bruno, like with this club, Richie is beloved for a lot of different reasons, right? Not just the fact that he's feisty and all that. And then sort of bringing it back a little bit to this Vanny talk is would he be able to get those guys on board, right? Like we're not even talking about the DPs. Like, can you get the vet guys like a Richie, like an Oso, those guys on board? I'm not, Kevin Long. Like, can you get those? Maybe he sounds like a really personable guy, but I don't see it.
Vancouver personable, not Toronto personable, which is sort of what you were saying.
Last on sort
Gord
of the
raises a really interesting point just before we get off the Vanny train. We should leave Vanny alone. I went to a couple games out in Vancouver, and they do well at home because visiting teams don't want to play on that turf. That's a really good point, Gord. That's a very good point. And then, oh my God, this is Demi. hot take, would love to see Andrea Pirlo coach this club. That might be genius. I mean,
What?
I don't
No.
want him. No, he's a terrible coach. He's like Rooney, like great player, absolute garbage coach. But if anybody's gonna out attitude our whinging wingers, it's Andrea Pirlo. So if only
true.
for the shenanigans, maybe, if
Yeah.
only for the press conferences. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on,
Yeah.
because
All right.
I think this last one is really interesting.
Yeah, so the last one on the list, and it sounds like, again, the club did speak to him, is Robin Fraser, former Colorado Rapids head coach, former assistant under Greg Vanney here at Toronto FC. Again, an interesting one in a sense that, he is in the MLS coaching circles. He is a guy who knows the club. He is a guy who plays a system that fits within sort of Marco Neppe's sort of realm. So from that perspective, he might be a great fit. I just don't know if the club wants to go back down that well, right? I just don't know if they'd want to go down the Greg Vanney coaching tree well right now. But he's somebody
let's
that
not
intrigued.
be affiliated with our winningest coach ever by proxy. Like,
Well, I mean,
can they afford to make these decisions? I mean, it seems like.
I mean, he
stupid.
would be intriguing to me. I mean, again, this would have to be. I think if from a fan perspective, it would be okay. So we're in rebuild mode. Like we're not. We're trying to really rebuild this thing.
I think the heads would do backflips. I mean, this is Greg Vanney's understudy. In many ways, Vanney was assistant for Fraser. Like they often switch places, right? And I think, I kind of wish Rachel Dory was on this, because we've never asked her, what. I remember Robin Fraser, when he went to Colorado, is because he's from there and he wanted to relocate with his family. There was a drive to relocate,
and he got a head coaching job
back hometown, and he got a head coaching job. I wonder on the way out at TFC if there was any bad blood, or if it was just simply like, I don't know.
No, I don't think there was. I remember. I actually remember. I wonder. So sorry, side story.
Inside baseball.
I ran into him at the 2019 Cup final. He was in Seattle for the final, and I remember parts of this conversation, but I also don't remember parts of this conversation because I was very hungover on a flight back from Seattle to Denver. But we spoke very briefly, and look, I think the main reason he left is he got a head coaching job in a city that he had played in, for a club that he knew really well, and it was his chance to be a head coach again, right? So like that was the reason he left. It wasn't like bad feelings. It wasn't any hard, like TFC said, yes, go. Like, obviously you have this opportunity, please go. So I don't think there was any hard feelings in that regard. I think he holds the club in high regard. And obviously, look, I think if he had an opportunity to be a head coach again in a place that, again, he knows very well, in a club that he knows very well, he would jump at that opportunity. I just don't know if he's the guy that this management group would want.
And I think that's, out of all of these choices, even over Jim Curtin, I think Robin's the guy. I think if he's available, you jump at the chance. I mean, there's a lot of asterisks there. You say it's the club he knows. I think this club is unrecognizable from the juggernaut that it was in 2017. And I think,
yes, but I think he knows enough people behind the scenes that are still around, right? From that perspective, I think, the idea of being able to be a part of a system that is being built again. Yeah, I think he would. I think he would jump at that opportunity. Again, I just don't know if and I think he is a good coach. I think he got a harsh rap at the end of his time at Colorado. I think they sold a lot of players from underneath him. Like, he got them to the playoffs that one year, and then the next year they fell apart, and it's because they sold a bunch of guys. So
listen, Colorado's like the opposite sketch of TFC, right? If Chris Armas is working there, then Robin Fraser is going to work here. Hire the man immediately. Like, there we go. The fates have aligned. But of all of them, I think he's the guy. I agree with you. I think the club is allergic to looking backwards, even though they love to do it. So it's like kind of a whiplash sort of situation. And like I said, there's a million asterisks. There's a lot of dangers in member berries, right?
Mm.
And this is member berries, but he's really not unqualified for this.
No, he's super qualified. Super qualified.
And like you said, at the in the same breath as like, Jim Curtin's now got an axe to grind. He's got something to prove. I think Robin Fraser's got something to prove. And that's worked well for us. Present, the last couple of years notwithstanding, but our greatest successes have been sad sack cases that have an axe to grind, something to prove. Toronto gives them the opportunity to reset their ledger. And I think, Robin Fraser can't be ignored in that case. In your outsiders comments, you're going into the Marco Neppe connections, which if you look at TFC Live, which is something I don't enjoy doing right now because it's, it's so depressing. But, it is something that the sickos are constantly bringing up. What does Neppe have in his binder? Who does he have in his Rolodex? Who are we not considering? Who does he have relationships with that he can immediately make, who's his Adama Diamande, for lack of a better metaphor, right? Who can he call up immediately and say, come to Toronto. I've got a place for you. And I'm not, you mentioned a really interesting name, and I'll let you run with it.
Yeah, look, this is not I've got some kind of insider knowledge on this, right? We don't know for sure who that might be. They may not be rolling into the Rolodex for him, right? They may just not be doing that at all. But like we talked about Tommy Wheeldon Jr., he was one of the outsiders. He's not the guy. They're not hiring Tommy Wheeldon Jr., so don't worry about that. The other outsider I have on here is Niko Kovac, the former Bayern Munich manager, sacked by Wolfsburg, I believe, just prior to the start of the Bundesliga season. So he is available, though I think he's been tapped for a few jobs in Europe as well, in the Bundesliga, and I think in the Championship. But I don't think this is where they go, right? I think, there might be somebody they say like, hey, would there be interest in coming to MLS? He probably says no. But it is something to think about, as we're sort of trying to speculate on like who could be in the realm of who does Neppe have, because he's been involved in the interview process, right?
Like, and if they hand him the keys, I mean, they haven't said outright that they've handed him the keys.
That's another thing. We don't know exactly what Marco Neppe's role is going to be.
Yeah, we don't know. But I would assume, and again, you know what they say about assumptions, but I would assume if they've given him the keys, right, then he wants to create this club in his own image. He wants to be the guy that can bring the Bayern Gemeinschaft kind of attitude to TFC and, step 3 profit, right? He's going to want one of his guys. And one of his guys, sure, if Bill Manning approached, rest in peace, but if Bill Manning approached Niko Kovac and said, hey, I've got a bag of money, he might get laughed out of town. But if Marco Neppe approaches and says, not only do I have a bag of money for you, but I'm here to I'm here to be sort of the cheesecloth between this horrible front office situation and this insane league and you, it may be an offer too good to pass up. Right. This is how
potentially.
I mean, this is how it happens in North American clubs when you bring in a big name above the line European talent. Right. That's what you want. You want them to be a safe landing spot for their friends across the pond, to sort of force the evolution of your club, which is, if nothing, not what they were trying to do. So I think that we can't ignore that. You
No,
know?
no, I don't think so. And Alex did bring up earlier Pellegrino Matarazzo is another opportunity. He's
Mm-hmm.
American, German-born American coach. He's been at Hoffenheim. He's been at a few clubs in Germany. He's currently out of a role at the moment. At one point, I think he was
Mm-hmm.
tapped up to potentially be the U.S. men's national team boss.
Yeah, he was. He was
While
for
they were
a
kind
hot
of going
minute.
through
Yeah.
the do we want Berhalter, do we not want Berhalter
Yeah.
era.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Look, I think whether these are real names or whether we're throwing them out there because they've got Marco Neppe connections, I think one of the things I would be cautious about when thinking about bringing in a European manager, which I'm not saying don't ever do it,
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
think the history of this league tells us that managers that come over from Europe and try to coach in this league generally don't do really well. And it's
Sure.
not because they don't have tactical acumen, it's not because they don't understand, like, it's just MLS is a lot
There.
to deal with,
It's a
right?
gauntlet.
Like
It's a gauntlet.
it's not that it's tactically better or the players are, it's nothing to
Nope.
do with that. It's just MLS being wacky old MLS, and it is
Yeah.
so different for managers who have come over, especially from Europe, in the way things get done in terms of player
Mm-hmm.
signings, in terms of the way that the schedule works, in terms of travel.
Travel.
It's so different. The amount of time you have with your team, it's so different than Europe. And I think sometimes European managers need time to kind of settle in. Some have been successful. I know
We
we
got
talked about
nothing
Tata
but
Martino.
time,
I know he's
Mike.
not European, but he coached
Mm-hmm.
in Europe, right? Like you're
Yeah.
talking about, Ronnie Dyla, who's now in at, what did he get hired at? Austin, I think.
Oh.
Where did he get
Yeah, I
hired?
think so.
Or
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
Atlanta. I think he's at
Yeah.
Atlanta now.
Atlanta. It is. It is.
Um,
It's Atlanta United. Yep.
but like he struggled when he started in MLS. Now it ended well because he won an MLS Cup, but most people forget
Mm.
that in that 2021 season at the beginning of the year, there were in New
Tire
York
fire.
there were Ronnie Dyla out signs,
Yeah.
right?
Raging tire
So
fire. Mm-hmm.
yeah, so like the history of European coaches in MLS has not always been great. I'm not saying don't do it. I think that's just something that if TFC go down this path, we have to be cognizant of.
I mean, I'm very cognizant of it, but I'm also cognizant of the fact that, like, I had very little expectations of the club's success last year. I have even less this year. Like, maybe that's me protecting myself. Maybe that's the realist or the pragmatist in me. But that panic button that Matty Doyle said to throw in the closet, I've lit it on fire and nailed it to the other side of the world this year, right? So we have nothing but time. And again, if you're hiring Marco Nepi, or if as a sporting director or as a guy that brings coffee into the meetings, you have to have an end game for this. And what is the end game if not to suckle at the teat of his expertise, right? And that expertise means that, like, so I think we have the time. I think we have the time to experiment here, because I'm not hoping for a miracle. Those days are over. I think this is another lost season. I hate saying it at the outset of the season, but I do. Um, so why not? Why not? Instead of being saddled with mid aspirations, can Jim Curtin figure out spending TFC's money? Can Robin Fraser recapture the magic of 2017? Why not go big? Can Coach X, can Niko Kovac handle it in MLS? To me, it seems like a no brainer. Like, and this is, I think, a perfect segue to Lorenzo, because I don't think there is a coach on this planet that can coach those two at this club in the year of our Lord 2024. So trying to uh, find a coach that's going to magically unlock this roster is meaningless. It's meaningless. So you either need a placeholder, or you need someone with enough personality that they can, again, pull a Herdman, for a Euro Herdman, a level up from Herdman, for like enough to entertain us. So yeah, I think that, also you can experiment, and it just comes back to, what is Marco Neppe doing there if you're not going to take advantage of that pipeline if you're not going to take advantage of that expertise. You don't need Marco Neppe to tell you to hire Jim Curtin. You don't need Marco Neppe to tell you to take a flyer on Robin Fraser, right? So what is he still doing there?
Yeah, and I think that is one of the the big sort of picture questions that this club, I think they've answered internally. I just don't think they've made it public, which is somewhat frustrating, I think,
So
for
frustrating.
fans, right? Because it's kind of like we kind of know the answer, but you're not saying it, and we don't really have a good reason as to why you're not saying it.
No
Like
good reasons.
if he is here to essentially become the new club president or sporting director or whatever that looks like. I mean, really, end of the day, if it's sporting director, isn't that really what Jason Hernandez should be doing? But you know, like then what is he like? Special advisor? Like what are we? What does that really mean?
I mean, I work in movies. You know how many different titles that end with producer basically denote somebody writing a check or driving by the set one day. Like, why have we not heard from him yet? He's been involved with the club for months.
Yeah, if he's in the interview process for the new manager.
Yeah, like why haven't they put him in front of a microphone? And like we are dying for content from this club. You know, like what are we doing?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot there. But anyway,
yeah. So to wrap this all up, I think we should, if all goes well, and I think it should, then we should get an announcement from the club this week on who the new manager is. So stay tuned for that. I mean, if they don't have it this week, I mean, they'll do it next week, but it's just it will not, there are going to be a lot of people who are not impressed with that. And look, they'll have their reason.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll have some kind of reason, but like, I think just to, one, like you said, just to give the fans some news, and two,
it just communicates incompetence. And that's the last thing this club wants to do.
Well, I know it communicates. I don't think it is. I don't actually think it is incompetence. I think what it is just they're look. This was brought up two end of season press conferences ago by Jonathan Osorio by saying like things were getting out a lot at the time, and it was true, right? Things were just leaking about the clubhouse, about the club itself, all the transfer rumors they were doing, like that stuff was leaking out. And I think the club has, in some ways, maybe overcorrected a little bit in that by like literally just holding everything super tight to the chest, right? Like like if some of the top people, the top media people in MLS can't figure this out, then that's I mean. In some ways, that's good because you don't want everything leaking out about the team. But at the same time, to keep fans engaged, to keep fans,
you're a public-facing organization.
Right.
I mean, and I think right there on the box.
Yeah. Right. And I think if you are going to be that, you need to at least give fans some kind of idea on sort of where you're at this. And it's not like it, transfer signings is one thing, right? Like transfer, a million different things could go wrong in the transfer.
100%.
I get that.
100%.
I think for the search for a head coach, at least saying like, hey, we're down to the final 5 candidates. We're down to the final 3 candidates. Yeah. Then at least we know where in the process you are. And, now we're kind of like, oh, I think the manager's coming this week. We have no idea. Training camp, they take off for Spain in a week and a half. We don't know who it is.
We don't know who it is. And let me, I've been trying to sort of blunt force this into the dialogue since we started, but it was the CPL interview with the commissioner. I believe, I'm paraphrasing, but here's the paraphrase. We haven't done Quebec yet because we want to make sure that we want to ensure that it's successful. Well, buddy, if we could ensure that something was successful, nothing would ever fail. It's gobbledygook. It's double talk, right? You can't ensure success, or that nothing would ever fail ever. Like that, it's double negative gobbledygook, BS gibberish, right? And too often TFC is also guilty of this sort of double talk nonsense kind of thing. Of course you'd want it to be successful. You're not telling, like, of course we do. But there's a 50% chance that it won't be. And that's okay. That's the world that we live in, right? Like it's a game of 50-50s, right? Yeah. So it's just, it's a whole lot of hot air being expended for, and it's obfuscation, and we're smarter than that. I say this all the time. You can't congratulate TFC land for how sophisticated we are and how on it we are in our IQ and our understanding of the game, and then gaslight us as hard as this company as TFC's been you cannot have it both ways. And I think that that's the source of so much of our frustration. Before we get into Lorenzo, someone asked about that cash money thing. The source is an interesting one. I think it's a lot of, in case you don't know, Mike, they were saying
I know
that TFC is desperate to get him back from loan. That's agent speak for, please buy him immediately kind of thing. So let's all let it happen, because we love cash money. He didn't work out at TFC, but we want him to enjoy a long and illustrious career. So let's not spoil that for our boy Cash Money. Let the wheels spin and go from there. And I think it's the same with Lorenzo. God, if he goes to Como, I'm going to die.
Yeah, let's get into it, and quickly on Cash Money.
I'll die of happiness, but it's still going to bother the hell out of me when he's going to play with my favorite player of all time, willingly taking maybe my least favorite player of all time outside of Portuguese Pepe.
Yeah, fair enough.
So
quickly on Cash, the reason why this has all come up is he's actually started to get on fire for Wydad in Morocco, so he's playing really well right now, and there's a possibility that they may want to actually extend the buy option on his loan. And that would actually benefit TFC quite a bit, because depending on which model they want to use, they can open up a U22 slot, which would actually be quite useful for TFC. Speaking of figuring out what model they want to do, you can't really do that until you figure out what you're going to do with the current DPs you got. And a report came out yesterday from Tom Berger. And when I say report, it's stuff we already kind of knew. But it's nice to kind of just see it officially kind of in writing that Toronto FC and Lorenzo Insigne's camp are looking to divorce. They're looking to end this. In what way will it happen? That's the question, right? We don't know. Yeah. Is it going to be the buyout, or will he, are they going to mutually agree something, or is somebody actually going to pay a transfer fee for him? And that then led into a report from Football Italia today, linking him with two clubs in Serie A right now, Fiorentina and you mentioned Como.
And Cesc Fabregas FC. Please don't go there.
So, look, we have expounded quite a lot of time on this particular player in this particular situation, but I think we're now getting close to what we think is the end game. Look, things could fall through with the transfers. If they do,
you believe that, even as it's coming out of your pursed lips? I don't. I think
they're trying. I don't know if they're going to be able to execute. That's the thing, right? Like,
I have more money than Como, and I'm eating.
Como has money. Oh, Como has money. Como has money. If they want to spend the money, they're not going to pay him They're not going to pay him $50 million, and TFC will probably take a nominal transfer fee. Like, to get rid of him, they'll take a nominal transfer fee. Like, they're not asking.
We'll get rinsed. We're going to get rinsed on this any way you slice it, right?
Yeah, like you're not getting 10 million for him. Like, you might get 5. I know that sounds insane for a Euro winner, but like that's what he's at right now, right? Like I
think he's at $5. Let him pay his own way into the club.
Yeah, I don't know how this ends, right? Like that's just the question. Is just how are they going to try to make this happen, right? Will they end up having to eat the money? That's the thing.
We've known that for 3 years now.
No, I think we've known that that's an option.
Hold up here.
Well, look, I think we've known it's an option, but I don't think we've ever look, a lot of people, both in the comments of the show, you guys have said it, I've said it, right? Would MLSC want to eat that money? And a lot of people said that's crazy. Why would you want to eat all that money? I think in the end of the day, I think they were coming down to the point where it's like, you may have to, right? Especially if they can't figure out something with Fiorentina or Como or whatever other club they're talking to about a potential move. He'll go to Serie A and he'll take a pay cut. He knows he's not going to make 15 million or whatever he's making this season at those clubs, and that's fine, right? Look, taking 4 million a year, you're still living pretty well, right? Like, no, it's not 15 million, but $4 million when you're already a millionaire.
Put your TFC paycheck in the bank, live off the interest for the rest of your life. Just stop buying Louis Vuitton everything like an idiot. But
well, I mean, look,
I'm
if
not
he's
his
got a
I'm not his
sponsorship or whatever,
advisor.
then he's getting those for free,
for
right?
sure
Like right?
Sure,
So like
Louis Vuitton wants to be involved with a player that scored 4 goals. Anyway, whatever. Like, look, I don't know. I don't believe it. I still don't think he's willing to walk. I still think he's Josmer. He's owed a certain amount of guaranteed money and he's not willing to walk away from it. I think interest is such a meaningless word. Like, any football team on the planet will take Lorenzo Insigne for $200K, especially the Comos and the Fiorentinos of the world. Right? I don't think Juve has the space, but mid-level teams that look at the resume and see that we want to get rid of him desperately will offer, out of the goodness of their heart, to take him for next to nothing. Is that interest, or is that just, is that just?
Well, look, I mean,
like,
in the end of the day,
interest means that there's money on the table. Not, we'll help you by taking this guy for free. Sorry about your arcane MLS rules. You're still stuck with the DP tag, but we'll help.
Well, no, I mean, look, in the end of the day, if Como come up and Turch said it right, they're owned by Vinicius Rich's fan, like, they got money, right? Mm-hmm. If they just say, like, hey, we'll give you $3 million and call it a day, we'll agree personal terms with Insigne, and it'll probably be maybe closer to what he was asking for when he left Napoli, maybe slightly less, maybe in that sort of $4 to $5 million range. And he gets that, then I think it's a done deal and he's gone, right? TFC, snap your hand off. You give me $3 million for a player that can essentially save me, $35 million over the next couple of years.
I think it's not happening. I don't think
snap
he cares.
your hand off.
I think that's guaranteed money. I think he'd love to get his guaranteed salary and go play in Como because he's an asshole. I mean, let's be fair. But I don't think TFC, I think it's the same old. TFC is not willing to eat the salary and be stuck with the DP tag and the PR nightmare and this and this. I think they're still holding on to this idea that they're going to get some kind of satisfaction out of this. I can't argue with it. I'm not staring down the barrel.
I don't think so. I think they're done. I think they realize they have to let him go. Like, I think both sides realize it's divorce time. Like, I really
care
do.
What
I actually
his
think
side thinks.
No, but but they have to. You just explain why they have to, right? Because at the end of the day, if they're like, we're not going anywhere, then you only got one other option, is you buy him out by force, and you have to eat all the money, right? So like, you do have to care what his side wants, and it sounds like both want to end this, which is actually good for us in a sense that you might be able to find a solution here. Yeah, you might be able to find a solution that works. But we'll see. I mean, I think the one thing that this does is I do think in some ways this holds up moves you want to make, right? I think because you got to.
It's all we've been saying for as long as I can remember.
Yeah, you got to figure out what you're doing with him to then sort of let the other dominoes drop, 100%. Right? And both from a GAM, TAM, thank you ma'am perspective, a DP slot perspective, an international spot perspective,
even a gaffer perspective. Let's be honest.
You got to figure out what this is, and if it's done, then it's done. And I've said it in the past. I think if it comes to it, you eat the money. It sucks. It definitely sucks to eat $30-odd million over the next couple of years.
Calcio says it's only around US 15 million, which is, not 30, but still 15. So there you go.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Well, because he's owed this year and he's owed the full of 26, right? Like, that's the end of his contract.
Wasn't it a stupid summer thing where we get like a club option on the second half of the year? I wouldn't be surprised if those 4 goals unlocked performance incentives. Like,
no, he joined. Yeah, no, I don't think so. I don't think it is. I think you have to pay him the full.
Worst contracts in the history of the word contract. Like,
yeah,
let's
I think they have to pay him the full. So like, look, at the end of the day, okay, you got to eat the money, and maybe he leaves some money on the table. Maybe you get him to agree to leave something. He'll pay the most, and you say, hey, you're leaving a couple million on the table, but we'll let you go, and you can sign with whoever you want. That might end up being what they do. I would be very surprised if he's in Spain for a training camp. Because if you're trying to move him, the last thing you want him to do is get on turf and then tweak a calf. like that would be the death knell and try. Like, you know what I mean? Like if there is a transfer out there, if there is a move like that out there, the last thing you want is this guy going in for training and he starts revving up the gears.
You're right.
And pop goes a calf.
Let me put you on the spot then. If he shows up to Marbella, that means he's here for the year.
No, I don't think that necessarily means he's here for the year. I just think you got to be if you're letting him show up to Marbella and train, it's good. It's like light running on the side until you figure out what the deal is. Because the last thing you want is like, hey, we got this deal. We're getting let's just even say it's $1 million in a transfer fee, right? It's peanuts in a transfer fee, and this guy goes out and you put him in a training session and he's going, even if he's going 70% and something tweaks in the calf, club walks away from the deal. Yep. Right. So and if the report is correct and they're both really looking for this to end in some way, if you're TFC, you're not taking the risk. Like I do not take the risk.
Crazy. So we're at. Take some comfort in it, TFC land. That means that we're not talking about months. We're talking about weeks before something happens, good or bad. In many respects.
If it's going to be a transfer, we've got 3 and a bit weeks for the European window to stay open, which is funny because the way the MLS window is, it literally opens, I think, a day and a half before the European window closes. So that's TFC haven't made any moves, like transfer moves, because the window is not open yet for MLS clubs, though MLS clubs are announcing things before they officially, all the paperwork gets done on the 31st. But
they sure are.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's again, I think you can make some tweaks here and there to the roster and bring players in and stuff like that, but until this domino drops, that's when you might see some of the bigger stuff happening.
I agree. I 100% agree. 100%.
Yeah, so that's where we're at.
Nothing happens without a decision being made on this, and we both know the decision that needs to be made, but it's not an easy one.
I think it is.
There's a lot of money.
It is.
It is from a frustrated, God, I don't want to talk about this guy anymore on my podcast. Like, where I land, but at the end of the day, I'm not a bean counter. I'm not. I have no skin. We do have skin in the game, but I don't have financial. I do with season tickets, so I'm just going to shut up now. But please go.
Yeah, I know what we're going to do over and over. Do we want to save it for the next show?
Let's save it. Let's save it for the next show. We didn't think we'd go this long, but we always do, Mike.
We always do. There's always a lot to talk about, and thank you everybody in the comments. You guys have been on fire as normal, dropping some really good comments, having some really good chats in there. So really do appreciate that. Welcome back to 2025 again. Appreciate you always hanging with us. We are going to be back more regularly now that the season's starting and training camp is about to kick off. So tune in Mondays, 7 p.m. Tell a friend if you haven't yet. We're here on YouTube, and you can also find us still on X. I think we're going to end up on Blue Sky at some point. I don't know.
We got to figure out what I did to mess everything up, but maybe I'll just kill the account that I made that was tied to... this is a little inside baseball, but I effed up. So we'll fix that. We'll fix that immediately. You can't post video to Blue Sky yet. So
not yet. No. Well, you can, but it's convoluted. But at least we'll be on there and we'll be responding to you on that platform soon. But other than that, find us Toronto Till I Die. Search us on Google. We're on all the stuff. For all Jeffrey. Yeah, all the stuff. For Jeffrey P. Nesker, I'm Michael Newell. See you next week. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
And wait. And baby, I'm TFC till I die.